The snow began like it always did, soft, quiet, harmless. It came in gentle flurries at first, brushing the tops of the pine trees and dusting the lodge roofs like powdered breath. But by the fourth day, it no longer whispered. It roared. The wind howled through the valley like a wounded spirit, and the sky turned the color of bone. It didn't stop for 7 full days. 7? Not since the elders were children had the snow come this heavy, this fast. Each morning, the tribe's people pushed open lodge flaps only to find them sealed shut with ice. Smoke struggled to escape the fire holes. Breath froze in the air before the mouth could close again, and still it fell. They stopped counting the inches. Then they stopped seeing the sun. By the 10th day, a full family from the upper ridge didn't return. Their shelter had been built on a slope, a proud design, tall and squared like the settler cabins. When the snow cracked loose from the mountain's face, it didn't hesitate. It swallowed the lodge whole, dragging it half a length of a buffalo before the walls caved in. No screams were heard, only the sound of the mountain exhaling. The others took note. Even the most confident ones began packing their roofs with extra hide, reinforcing their poles, lowering their ceilings. But for one man Tahu, the son of stone speakers, the storm was not something to brace against. It was something to become one with. Tahu remembered what his grandmother once said, "If you fight the mountain, it wins. If you listen to it, it holds you." And so he dug down. While others stacked logs higher and lashed roofs tighter, he carved inward, into the curve of the hill where snow drifted thickest. His shelter sank into the ground like a sleeping animal. Its roof wasn't flat, it arched like a spine, layered with woven willow and bent bone, all blanketed by snowpack he refused to clear. People mocked him. "It looks like a cave," one said. "He'll smother in there," said another. But Tahu said nothing. He let them build taller. He built deeper. And when the sky turned white for a second time that moon, he was ready. The snow came heavier now, as if the sky had cracked wide open. A wind from the east, the kind that twists trees, whipped across the plains and slammed into the ridges. That's when the real avalanches began. One by one, the high shelters began to fail, not all at once, not loudly, just cracks, groans, and the hush of snow swallowing roofs. Even the settlers' cabins, sharp-angled, raised, proud, began to sag beneath the weight. But Tahu's shelter didn't move, not a groan, not a shift. Because it wasn't standing against the snow, it was breathing with it. Tahu didn't invent the shelter, he remembered it. The design hadn't been drawn, hadn't been written. It had lived in stories once told around fire circles by elders with frost still in their beards and dreams of long winters still echoing behind their eyes. Stories of when the mountain grew angry, when animals dug deeper and humans followed them underground, not to hide, but to survive. As a child, Tahu hadn't listened with his ears, he listened with his bones. His grandmother had taken him to the edge of a collapsed snow cave once, where 3 people had lived through an avalanche by breathing through a reed chimney no wider than a hawk's wing. She had said, "Stone speaks slow, snow speaks softer. If you want to live, stop talking and listen." So when the others laughed at the shape of his shelter, its rounded top, its thick snowpack, its fur-wrapped walls, he didn't argue. Because every curve, every compression, every buried wall was part of a memory passed down through fur and stone. The outer layer was snow, but not fresh snow. It was old snow, packed tight, the kind that turns blue in the shadows and hums with pressure. Tahu had let it harden, then added more on top, pressing it by hand, and put until the entire roof gleamed like ice armor. Inside, the walls weren't wood. They were layered, willow, bent like ribs, hide, stitched and smoked, and fur, sewn from deer and wolf, not just for warmth, but for breathability. The structure could flex. It didn't resist the storm, it shifted with it, like a body crouching through wind. At the top, a smoke hole, small, tight, breathing just enough. Not open like the settler chimneys that whistled and choked in heavy wind. This one pulsed. It was alive. His bed was fur-lined and sunken, the fire always low and steady. He didn't need to burn big. The snow walls kept the warmth inside, and the ground beneath him, insulated with dried grass and woven mats, never froze. This wasn't engineering, this was intuition. Not survival through strength, but survival through surrender. A boy from another camp came to visit with his father, both wrapped tight in buffalo hides. The father grunted disapproval, but the boy lingered, eyes wide, touching the curved walls and whispering, "It feels like the belly of the earth." Tahu smiled. "That's what it is." Because this shelter wasn't just a thing built, it was something remembered. A shape once forgotten by those who stood too tall. A way of bending to nature before it broke you. A conversation between man and mountain, spoken in silence, held in snow. Later that night, as another wind rose across the ridge and yet another roof collapsed to the west, Tahu lay inside his lodge, smoke drifting slow, breath steady, and thought, "This shelter is not mine. It belongs to those who listened before me." It happened when Tahu was still a boy, not quite old enough to join the hunt, but old enough to carry water and fetch firewood. He remembered the day because the sky had been blue, the air calm, and no one expected the storm. The lodge that fell belonged to his uncle. It had been built fast tall logs, thick bark, stitched well, but raised proud, the kind settlers admired, tall roof, firm spine, open vent to release smoke in a perfect column. Tahu had helped gather branches for it, proud to be included. It was the kind of structure that made people feel untouchable. Until the snow came. Not over weeks, but all at once. A thawed day turned sharp by sundown, followed by a sudden dump of powder as thick as elk hide. Wind pushed it from the mountainside, and without warning, the upper slope groaned. The sound didn't come like thunder. It came like a sigh, long, low, full of sorrow. Then came the crack. Tahu heard it in his chest before his ears. By the time they reached the lodge, it was too late. The roof had caved inward. 2 lives were lost. A third, his cousin, had survived by pure accident, having stepped outside to relieve himself. They found him shaking in the snow, not from cold, but from knowing he had been 1 heartbeat away from being buried with his father. That night, no one spoke by the fire. Only the pop of wood and the low moan of the wind filled the lodge. Tahu's grandmother pressed his small hand against her chest. "What is heavy can kill," she said. "What listens can live." It stayed with him. Not just the words, the silence that followed them, the look on her face, the way she stared into the fire as if searching for shapes in the past. From that day on, Tahu began drawing in the dirt. He shaped curves instead of peaks. He built small snow domes and crushed them under weight to see how they cracked. He played with wet hides and willow branches, learning how to bend without snapping. The memory of collapse never left him. It became the blueprint for everything he would build. While others measured success by how high a roof could stretch, Tahu began asking a different question. How much weight can this roof welcome before it breaks? Years later, when people praised the strange, low, rounded shelters he made, he never accepted their compliments. Because those shelters were born not from genius, but from grief. And every time the snow piled high, every time he pressed a hand against the side of his lodge and felt it hold strong, he whispered a name into the wind. The name of his uncle, the one who taught him, without ever meaning to, that the strongest shape in the snow is the one that remembers how to fall without breaking. Snow was never the enemy. That was the first lesson Tahu taught anyone who came asking about his strange, curved shelters. The snow didn't attack it buried, it didn't strike it settled, it moved when disrespected. But when understood, it could become the strongest shield the land had to offer. He had learned early that trying to keep snow off a shelter was like trying to keep rain from falling. The settlers didn't see it that way. They built tall to escape it. They hacked it off their roofs with shovels, cursed it as it piled high. Their cabins, though sturdy, groaned under the weight. Their chimneys clogged. Their eaves cracked. But Tahu did something else. He let the snow fall, then he shaped it. As the drifts grew, he packed them down with his hands, his boots, sometimes his own back. He would stomp the outer layer until it compressed into a hard, icy shell. When new snow came, he pressed that down too. Layer by layer, he built what looked like a white hill, but inside was his home, warm and still. The snow insulated, it muffled the wind, it reflected heat inward. And when the blizzard screamed across the ridge, the snow only tightened its grip, hardening like bone around the structure. Some called it a snow fort, some called it madness. But when they stood inside and listened, really listened, they could hear nothing. No wind, no moan of timbers, just the soft hush of breath and the low flicker of fire. Snow had become his ally. And it wasn't just the walls. He would shape vent tunnels through the top, angled away from the wind, so smoke could escape without letting in. Cold. He carved small channels under the door, so that meltwater could flow away and not soak the bedding. He even taught children how to pat the walls gently every morning, checking for shifts or cracks. Not out of fear, out of respect. Because snow wasn't permanent. It moved, it sighed, it breathed, and if treated well, it protected. One settler, desperate after a roof collapse, came to see what Tahu had built. He was skeptical, eyes narrowed, chin lifted with stubborn pride. Tahu said nothing, just handed him a curved bone and motioned for him to help pack the wall. By nightfall, the man was quiet, exhausted, but smiling. "This snow," he said, pressing a hand against it, "feels like it wants us to live." Tahu nodded, "Only if you let it." And so, while others saw snow as burden, Tahu shaped it into blessing. He didn't dig himself out of storms, he built a home inside them. And when the next avalanche came, roaring across the valley like thunder on hooves, his shelter did not crack. It embraced the snow and grew stronger. They laughed the first time they saw it. The settlers, wrapped in their heavy wool coats, boots stiff with frost, stood on the ridge overlooking Tahu's camp and pointed. "It looks like a snow bump," one of them said. Not a home, a grave. Their cabins stood proud in neat rows, angular, sharp-roofed, raised on stones to keep them dry. They believed in straight lines and tall walls. They believed nature could be kept out, tamed, beaten back with lumber and nails. Tahu's lodge looked nothing like theirs. It was sunken, rounded, half swallowed by snow. To them, it seemed more burial mound than shelter. One even joked, "If he's in there, he's already half dead." But Tahu heard the laughter. He always did. He didn't answer. Instead, he packed more snow along the south wall, smoothing it with the palm of his hand like a sculptor. He pressed his ear to the dome and listened. The snow was holding. Steady, no shifting, no cracking, just silence. The settlers weren't cruel men, just proud. And proud men often mistake silence for weakness until the mountain speaks. It was the third moon after the first snow when the sound came. A deep, low rumble, like thunder rolling beneath the ground. Birds burst from the trees, and even the wolves fell quiet. Then, from the upper ridge, a massive sheet of snow broke free. Not a slide, an avalanche. A wave of white fury sweeping down the mountain like a silent scream. Tahu saw it first. He grabbed the horn from beside his lodge and blew once short, sharp, urgent. His people knew what that meant. Into the shelters, close the flaps, seal the air, breathe slow. The avalanche struck the upper valley with a roar that made the earth flinch. Trees bent, snapped, vanished beneath the crush. The tall cabins of the settlers, built proud against the sky, stood no chance. One collapsed before the snow even reached it. The wind alone tore, the roof free. Another was buried whole, the chimney snapping like a twig. By the time the snow settled, 3 homes had vanished completely. Only a jagged fence post remained, jutting from the drift like a forgotten spear. The settlers who survived dug with bare hands, shouting names, sobbing into the wind. And then they looked up and saw Tahu's camp. Unmoved, his lodges still curved, his smoke still rising, and his people stepping out, quiet, unharmed, blinking into the bright stillness. No one laughed. That night, the settlers came down the ridge, heads low. They didn't ask for shelter. They didn't need to. Tahu opened his arms, waved them in, and shared what warmth he could. No revenge, no pride, only understanding. Because the snow does not punish, it teaches. And for those who mocked, the lesson had come not in words, but in weight. There was a hush inside the lodge, not from silence, but from safety. To step into Tahu's shelter was to enter a world where the storm no longer ruled. The snow muffled every sound, turning the howl of the wind into a distant hum, like a mother humming to a child she's yet to birth. The rounded walls cradled the heat, not with force, but with care, warmth held in fur and breath and ember, not fire that shouted, but fire that whispered. It didn't smell like wood smoke and ash, like the settlers' cabins. It smelled of hide, of cedar matting, of packed earth warmed by patience. You didn't walk into this place, you curled into it. Bent your head, softened your voice, forgot the cold outside like a dream you'd already escaped. Tahu sat cross-legged near the central fire pit, the glow licking gently at the walls, casting slow-moving shadows along the curved ceiling. Across from him sat a settler woman, shivering more from memory than frost. She clutched her son, who had cried himself into silence after watching snow bury his home. Tahu offered them roasted root and smoked fish, handed in a flat dish of bark. No words passed. Not yet. Then the woman spoke. "This place, it doesn't feel built. It feels born." Tahu nodded once. "It is shaped like we were round, low, breathing at the top." She didn't answer, but she ran her hand along the curved wall, marveling at how it didn't leak, didn't groan under weight. It felt alive, not with movement, but with memory, as if it knew how to protect. The children of the tribe lay bundled along the inner edge, heads tucked beneath hides, their dreams undisturbed, even as another gust roared past the smoke vent above. The dome flexed slightly with pressure, but never gave in. It held, because it had been built with the wisdom of womb and hill and cave, all the first homes of those who came before. And it wasn't just structure. It was spirit. The lodge faced the morning sun, not for light, but for blessing. The entrance was low, so even chiefs had to bow, a reminder that humility precedes warmth. The smoke vent at the top was shaped with intention, not only to draw air, but to let prayer rise with it. Every choice spoke of balance, between warmth and breath, between height and humility, between safety and surrender. The woman whispered, "Your walls breathe." Tahu replied, "Only because we do." That night, when the settlers returned to what little remained of their cabins, some found their fires out. Their walls cracked, and more than a few came back to Tahu's camp, not seeking shelter, but understanding. And for those who sat quietly enough, stayed still long enough, they felt it too, that ancient, sacred stillness, like being inside the earth's own body, safe, held, and remembered. It was the coldest night of the season. The wind didn't howl, it rasped, dragging its breath across the valley like claws over hide. Even the stars seemed brittle, flickering like they might crack and fall from the sky. Inside Tahu's shelter, the fire gave one last sigh and died. No ceremony. No spark left. Just a faint puff of smoke curling upward, then silence. The coals had burned too low while everyone slept. No one had tended it. No one woke in time. Tahu stirred first. The warmth that normally greeted him like an old friend was gone. He opened his eyes to the dim blue stillness of early morning and knew, by instinct, that the fire had left them. He reached out to his side. The fur was cool, not frozen, but far from comfortable. Beside him, Pana, the youngest, had curled into a tight ball, nose tucked into his knees. The others shifted in their sleep, the cold whispering across their faces. In a settler's cabin, this would be disaster. Without fire, the wood walls would frost from the inside out, breath would freeze. Fingers would blacken, panic would rise like steam. But in Tahu's lodge, no one screamed, no one rushed. Because the lodge had been built not with fire in mind, but with its absence already accounted for. Tahu moved slowly, calmly. He wrapped the children tighter in hides, checked the wall with his palm still cold, but not biting. He tapped gently on the packed snow above. No drip, no shift. The shelter was doing what it was meant to do. He walked to the door, bent low, and stepped out into the wind. The snow nearly took his breath. But he didn't flinch. He moved with the storm, not against it, just as the shelter had taught him. He reached the fire pit outside, buried beneath a shallow drift. With practiced hands, he brushed back the snow, uncovered a bundle of dry moss kept in a stone bowl, and sparked flint against steel. It took 2 breaths. Then flame. By the time he returned, the shelter had not dropped in temperature. The snow shell held its promise. The firs kept their warmth. The breath of those sleeping still rose gently in the air. He rebuilt the fire slowly, feeding it dry twigs, then thin branches, then larger wood from the store near the door. The smoke rose through the chimney like a signal not of distress, but of rhythm restored. When Pan awoke, he rubbed his eyes and said, "Did we lose the fire?" Tahu smiled. "Only for a little while." The boy frowned. "We didn't freeze." "We never would have," Tahu said. "Because we don't live inside fire, we live inside earth." And that night, after the storm had passed, the elders whispered the tale to the children, how the fire died and no one feared. Because they had built a home, not because of warmth, but in case it left them, and it had held. He arrived, wrapped in shame more than furs. A man from the lower ridge, one of the settlers who had once laughed hardest at Tahu's shelter, calling it a mole's den, and betting openly that it would collapse by the first snow. Now he walked slowly through the path between drifts, boots cracked, shoulders hunched, hands bare and raw. He had lost his brother to the last storm. They dug for hours. When the snow finally gave way, they found a hand reaching. Toward the chimney fingers curled, as if trying to hold on to warmth that no longer existed. His cabin, like so many, had stood too high and too proud. It had dared the mountain to come. And the mountain had come. Now the man stood at the edge of Tahu's camp, saying nothing, just watching. He didn't come with a trade. He didn't offer apology. He just knelt near the smoke hole and waited. Tahu saw him but didn't approach. Instead, he motioned for the children to continue shaping the snow walls, pressing down the new drift with curved bones, reinforcing the dome before nightfall. The man finally spoke. "I thought strong meant tall." Tahu didn't turn. Strong means quiet. The man nodded slowly, then pulled something from his coat, a small piece of burned wood, smoothed down to a handle. "This was part of our beam. I kept it as a lesson." Tahu looked at it, then at the man. "You came to learn?" "I came because I don't want to bury anyone else." So Tahu taught him. He showed him how to build with snow, not against it. How the shelter must curve like the rib cage of a beast, not to trap, but to breathe. How the weight above could be welcomed, redistributed, transformed into strength. He spoke of air channels, vent angles, how even the position of the fire could change the survival of a child. But he never raised his voice, because knowledge, Tahu believed, should be offered like food, with humility, not pride. Over the next 3 days the man stayed near, working beside the children. He burned his hands once not from fire, but from pressing snow too hard without gloves. Pana laughed and helped wrap them in deer hide, grinning. "You pack too angry," the boy said. "Snow doesn't like anger." The man smiled. "Then I'll try respect." By the time he left, he had shaped the start of a curved frame beside what remained of his old cabin. Others watched him go and began asking questions too. The laughter was gone now. In its place, wonder. And so, the stranger who had once mocked became the first settler to return, not for shelter, but for understanding. Because the truth had settled like the snow around them. The mountain wasn't cruel, it was simply honest. And survival didn't come from resisting it, but from listening to those who already had. He arrived wrapped in shame more than furs. A man from the lower ridge, one of the settlers who had once laughed hardest at Tahu's shelter, calling it a mole's den and betting openly that it would collapse by the first snow. Now he walked slowly through the path between drifts, boots cracked, shoulders hunched, hands bare and raw. He had lost his brother to the last storm. They dug for hours. When the snow finally gave way, they found a hand reaching toward the chimney fingers curled, as if trying to hold on to warmth that no longer existed. His cabin, like so many, had stood too high and too proud. It had dared the place, the mountain to come. And the mountain had come. Now the man stood at the edge of Tahu's camp, saying nothing, just watching. He didn't come with a trade. He didn't offer apology. He just knelt near the smoke hole and waited. Tahu saw him but didn't approach. Instead, he motioned for the children to continue shaping the snow walls, pressing down the new drift with curved bones, reinforcing the dome before nightfall. The man finally spoke. "I thought strong meant tall." Tahu didn't turn. Strong means quiet. The man nodded slowly, then pulled something from his coat, a small piece of burned wood, smoothed down to a handle. "This was part of our beam. I kept it as a lesson." Tahu looked at it, then at the man. "You came to learn?" "I came because I don't want to bury anyone else." So, Tahu taught him. He showed him how to build with snow, not against it. How the shelter must curve like the ribcage of a beast, not to trap, but to breathe. How the planda, weight above, could be welcomed, redistributed, transformed into strength. He spoke of air channels, vent angles, how even the position of the fire could change the survival of a child. But he never raised his voice. Because knowledge, Tahu believed, should be offered like food with humility, not pride. Over the next 3 days, the man stayed near, working beside the children. He burned his hands once, not from fire, but from pressing snow too hard without gloves. Pana laughed and helped wrap them in deer hide, grinning. "You pack too angry," the boy said. "Snow doesn't like anger." The man smiled. "Then I'll try respect." By the time he left, he had shaped the start of a curved frame beside what remained of his old cabin. Others watched him go and began asking questions too. The laughter was gone now, in its place. Wonder. And so, the stranger who had once mocked became the first settler to return not for shelter, but for understanding, because the truth had settled like the snow around them. The mountain wasn't cruel, it was simply honest. And survival didn't come from resisting it, but from listening to those who already had. Most roofs fear snow. They creak beneath it, sag under its weight, snap in the night when no one is listening. They are built like shields meant to deflect, to hold out nature as if nature were the enemy. But Tahu's shelter welcomed the snow. Each new storm didn't weaken it, it strengthened it. Each fresh layer was not a threat, but a gift. Like an animal growing thicker fur for winter, the shelter adapted, hardened, became more itself. That was the secret. The snow on top wasn't removed. It was shaped, compacted, curved to hug the lines of the dome. Over time, what had started as soft white turned blue with density, then silver with ice. Tahu would knock gently on the outer shell and hear the deep thud of strength. Settlers, when they saw it up close, were shocked. "It looks like a rock," one said, running his hand over the gleaming surface. "It is," Tahu answered, "but one that breathes." This design wasn't just resistance, it was transformation. The weight above didn't press down on the roof, it pressed into itself, distributed across a curved surface that transferred the load into the ground and back into the mountain. The shelter became part of the land. No corners to catch wind, no eaves to collapse, no chimneys tall enough to tear away, just a simple truth carved in cold: what bends survives, what blends endures. Even inside, the benefits were clear. The more snow on top, the less heat escaped. A single ember could keep the space livable for days. Children slept with bare hands against the hides. No frost gathered on the walls, no draft whispered through the seams. It wasn't just survival, it was comfort. Even the wolves seemed to respect it. They no longer prowled close. Perhaps they recognized something ancestral in its shape, a curve that echoed dens dug in the deep forest where pups nursed through blizzard nights. One elder said, "This shelter has no edges, that's why the spirits stay calm." Another added, "And why the mountain lets it live." The settlers, still rebuilding, began copying pieces. Rounded roofs, lower entrances, snow-layered walls. Some tried to go halfway, raising only the sides, keeping their tall peaks. But the Avalanche didn't care for compromise. Only the full curve survived. By the time spring's thaw whispered across the valley, Tahu's lodge stood not only unbroken, but more solid than ever. Not a single crack, not a single drop. Because while others tried to push nature back, Tahu had invited it in, and nature, when listened to, had not punished him. It had protected him. Years passed. Storms came and went, some crueler than others, but none strong enough to claim the curved shelter beneath the snow. Long after Tahu's hair turned the color of ash and his hands grew stiff, with age, his lodge still stood. Not because it had been built with rare materials, but because it had been shaped by memory. One spring, after Tahu had returned to the spirits, a young traveler from a far-off tribe came to the valley. He had heard stories of a home that outlived storms, a man who made the mountain kneel not through force, but through understanding. He didn't come with trade goods, he came with questions. He found the shelter still standing, half buried under late snow, its rounded shape now softened by seasons. The willow bones beneath the surface had faded, but the snowpack layered, hardened, wiser than any map still held strong. Inside, the air was still warm, no fire burned, no smoke rose. But warmth lingered, caught in the walls like breath held in winter. The traveler found a wooden post near the back, marked not with words, but with carvings: spiral, snowflake, mountain, hand. And one phrase, scorched into the wood in Tahu's hand: "We did not hide from the mountain. We listened to it." He sat for a long time in silence. Then, like the generations before, he began to rebuild. Not with arrogance, not with fear, but with respect. He packed the snow, curved the bones, bent the willow. He didn't measure, he remembered. And as he worked, the wind picked up, not to punish, but to test. It found no corners to bite, no edges to lift, only curve, only breath, only the shape that had survived. Later that year, when another avalanche swept through the upper valley, travelers found the same result. Square shelters crushed, angled beams cracked. But the curved mound at the valley's base remained snow-packed, earth-warmed, silent as ever. And so the legend grew. Not of a man, but of a design. Not of a building, but of a way. A way of sheltering that didn't come from defiance, but from deep listening. From accepting the mountain's language and answering not with pride, but with humility. Over time, others came not, just to copy, but to honor. They sat inside the shelter, even when they didn't need it, just to feel what it meant to be held by something older than timber, something that remembered wind and weight and grief, and still stood. And beneath every new layer of snow, that wisdom remained. Buried, yes, but never lost.